Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to do a review here, a book review on some interesting new series of books on these actual the Sphinx in Romania that they found and these underground tunnels, etc., that they found, which seem to have been built back in ancient times. A lot of these tunnels that were used by different. I'm researching the tunnels that are there. Has been claimed in this series of books that these were had some secret base that was in there, which is assumed to have been put by some extraterrestrials. The name of the book is Transylvanian Sunrise by Rado Cinamar with Peter Moon, which Radu is a Romanian name. So this is a Romanian guy supposed to be involved in with so many things over there and writing this whole series of books on the discoveries of this particular tunnel systems and this very advanced control center they found that is a holographic library that gives the history of the entire planet and so many other information. And of course, you know, we've got the usual problems here with all this stuff and the usual secretive nature of things. One of the problems also is the fact that this seems to be linked to another mysterious guy that has no credibility either. We have problems with it. This guy that kind of has disappeared in recent years, Dr. David Lewis Anderson, who was big into time travel, claimed to have some sort of working technology there and was doing stuff for many years on time travel and had a site, but you know, it's really nothing there. It was a combination of basic time travel information, and the website is still up and it's got good time travel information there, general stuff, but nothing new. And I always look for something new to verify the authenticity of it. If you're stating things that have been the local gossip for many years, the known types of things, and this book does a lot of that. A lot of stuff, and what people do is they add this stuff in to give them credibility. So if you want to give you credibility, you say, oh, this stuff. Oh, yeah, we've heard about that. You can punch that into a search and find out that this is something that was a real technology or one of those things talked about. I have problems with that because that's what writers do. It seems to me, and every time I've met very advanced technological species, etc., is you have no idea what they're talking about. They use completely different components to completely different science. You're stuck in the caveman electromagnetic system. This is not what extraterrestrials use. So to try and say they're using this because you heard about it, it's the same old con of, like quoting famous philosophers or authors. And this gives you credibility because you're saying, well, this guy said that. You'll find that with a lot of authors that want to either give credibility or sound like they're important. Well, Nietzsche said, Plato's said, ooh, Plato said it is good. So this is what you get into, and this book is ripe with that kind of information. Now, first of all, this Radu guy, which is a Romanian guy, and obviously these tunnels are in Romania. Now, what we know, how good the information is, what's going on there, we just really don't know anything. These are not new discoveries, by the way. These go back many, many years. I think in the book, this is referenced, the first book here. Did they reference 2002? This is like 20 years ago, or was it 2012? I don't know, but it's at least 10 to 20 years ago, and certainly there's not anything coming out on that. Now, I've heard of this. I saw a little documentary on this years ago. I found it interesting, and there were really no follow-ups. I forget, some sort of show, a cable show, I think it was. I'm going to try and hunt up information and talk about these tunnels and this area again, because this talks about a lot of advanced technologies, but not really. There's also some strange things here, because how would you know what is advanced technology or not? Now, we have problems here with the information, but I'll talk about that at the end of my review here. Now, the Peter Moon mentions that he gets booked from Radu frequently, and what he has to do is it's sent to him in Romanian. That's already a big mistake. The books he then has translated into English, and then he has to go through all the actual publishing stuff. So he certainly isn't getting this information direct. He's reprinting what this guy says. I don't know if he adds anything or subtracts anything to it. I'm sure he corrects some basic grammar and other things. I don't know. But he's not a witness to anything any whatsoever. So he gets this information. It's not even in English, because when you translate things, there's an awful lot of potential problems. I'm an expert in translating. We have the finest occult translator in history, Robert Blanchard, who did translations. The reason why his translations are so good is because he worked in the field. He knew what was meant by that. Now, if you know anything about foreign languages, they are very clumped together. Everything is kind of what it means in the structure of that sentence and what you're talking about. So a lot of words can mean everything out there, but it's how you use it. And some people give more credit to these words than they deserve. So translating from all this is a real problem. Now, Romanian, from what I understand about Romanian, it's kind of a strange language. It's half Latin and half Slavic or Russian. It's kind of a weird combination. Now, Romania was settled by the Romans. That's why it has that name, and they have a Latin-type language to a degree, and then it's, as I said, combined with other things. So it's an interesting country. It's still pretty primitive. It's very poor. It's known as the Romanians are considered gypsies and criminals around all of Europe. They're famous for prostitutes. I don't think there's anything that Romania is for other than Dracula in this day and age that people know about it. Of course, Dracula was a famous Christian hero who protected his country from the invasion of the Islam Turks. A few people know that, and was given these bizarre stories by Bram Stoker, who really knew nothing of what he talked about. But that was a fiction novel anyway. But they were going back to this particular castle. And his name was Vlad Tepes. He was called Dracula because he was a member of the Christian Knightly Order of the Dragon, defending his country against the onslaught of Islam. So understanding that, we fully need to know what Romania. So Romania is really not known for it. They do have one of the few countries, apparently, in continental Europe that has oil. And they've been an ally of the Nazis, and still are for that matter, because they had oil. So I don't know how much oil they have, but that's where a lot of oil came from. And they were one of the few. I don't think any other countries in continental Europe, or at least in Western continental Europe, have any kind of petroleum other than the North Shore, Norway. I guess there's something off of England. And these are all recent finds, by the way. And of course, we all know of the reserves in Eastern Europe that the Russians have. So this is all needs to be understood. So Romania is a strange place. It's a wild place. It's a very corrupt place. We have to understand it. Huge amount of corruption there. They're very poor. They're very organized, crime-based. Everyone knows this. So I don't need to go into that as well. This is what happens with poor countries that are never given any breaks, etc. So understand, I think they were kicked out of France. They kicked all the Romanians out because they were causing so much trouble. So these are things we have to understand. I don't know what that means with this particular person or anything else, but everything in its place. So where's the information coming from? Does it mean anything if this came from the UK or Germany because, they're more honest? Well, not really, because everybody's a lying scumbucket. So the whole idea is that. But, this is a shadow hanging over this information and their lack of sophistication, transportation, internet, all the things that go with these poor countries, and they're steeped in mysticism. They're very mystical. They believe in this, very similar to, I guess you would say, like the Mexican population. Everything is connected to a mysticism, and they believe in vampires and everything else. I mean, the only thing I know of that came out of Romania of any note was GH3. This was some sort of animal tranquilizer that people have taken that's supposed to have good results and do something. But that's always been in great question. I took that for many years and got nothing from it. But whatever. So he gets this his books from Rado. He stated this on an interview show with his buddy, and Douglas Dietrich, and that he gets these books. It takes about 6 months to redo a book, and it's a lot of work doing publishing. And he runs his own publishing house. Peter Moon published all the Montauk books, etc. So this is the process he goes through. So again, there's no verification. It's all what this guy talks about. Now, he has supposedly been over there, seen some stuff. I'm not sure what all that is. You got to read all their books, go through their stuff. It's quite a tenuous process, and even gets a little expensive doing research. So it takes a lot of time and a certain amount of money. You got to buy all the books. He's got newsletters. He's got other things. What is his jive on this? You got to find out what the other research out there. So there is a stone on the top of this Romanian mountain range that kind of looks like a sphinx, which is quite interesting. But it may be just one of the many millions of rock forms around the world that kind of look like something. So we'll get into that as well. There doesn't seem to be anything below it or anything else. If you dig down, it just kind of looks like that. And, this is very typical of rock formations everywhere. So I'm not sure what the jive there is. But okay, so this first book here, written by this guy with Peter Moon, it's hard to get into what's happening. I'm assuming the story initially here, there isn't that much to say when we get into the meat of it. So, you're into the book about 60%, and he's still talking about things that really don't relate very much. He's talking about how the Masons run the world, how they control everything, along with the Bilderberger group, and he's talking about this of who, the author himself is involved with conspiracy groups and has doubtful that they have very good information, being the fact that I don't know if he seems to be a practicing Scientologist. I'm not sure if Peter Moon is ex or not. Apparently, he was high up in the organization, working with the founder of that organization and part of Sea Org with and was around and working with, while he was still alive, the founder of Scientology, and so forth. So this guy's a big Scientologist, fully supports that, still talks about it in a very positive way, and how all their training is wonderful. Now, there is good things about Scientology, but he doesn't seem to bring up anything negative, and that must be because of the fact that he is heavily connected to them. Now, everybody else does. Michael, is it Rinder? I don't know if it's Michael Rinder, but Rinder, who was there for 35 years, high up in the church, has recently stepped away because of the problems there. So many other movie stars have. So, it's very well known that there's some weird stuff going on, particularly under the Scientology leadership now of Miscavige. So there is problems there, whatever's going on. It's hard to find anything positive about Scientology. And if they're doing such good work and helping train people and have libraries and other things, we certainly don't hear about that. So, but that's a lot of, public misinformation as well. I'm not sure what they're up to. And of course, when you're treated like a celebrity, it's very different than the average person. So there's an awful lot of people that complain about them. And so you wonder. On the other hand, I'm very fully aware of the kind of constant complaining people have that may not be justified, because they tend to be bad people. But who knows? There's just too much of it. And I don't think there's anything profound in Scientology. They claim to give people supernatural abilities, yet nobody's has ever seen this, so it is alleged. So, but, this is, knowing who the author is very important here. So he's talking about all these conspiracies and how the Masons run everything, an elite group of Masons, etc. Old hat, Bilderberger group. Old hat. You got nothing new? Well, we've heard this. You could have picked that out of your proverbial bottom to thrown into this book because, we all know that. So people that read this kind of book most likely will think that's the case. I don't know. This planet is ran by many different groups. Ultimately, organized crime runs this world with guns and gangs, and they intermix with governments and everything else. But when it really comes down to it, that's what the bottom line is. So I don't know what that is. And most Masons, and there's tens of thousands of them, are average Joes following their little thing, working together as their kind of little gang taking care of each other. Now, are there bad people in there doing stuff they shouldn't be? They're heavily connected, most judges, lots of police officers. All these things are Masons. This is a power structure. So there's certainly a lot of nepotism going on, a lot of supports there. And this may turn into affecting governments and everything else. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. They wield a lot of power. When you've got an organization filled with doctors, lawyers, and politicians, well, how can you not affect things? Now, their basic philosophy, from what I'm aware of, is pretty good. They're not preaching anything terrible. So I don't know. So are there an elite group that has grabbed certain powers within the Masons? Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Same thing we all know with the Bilderberger group, who's been gets together with all the rich and famous to manipulate the world. Well, is there anything different about that? Isn't that what Genghis Khan did? He, instead of doing it through the internet, which was just new at Genghis Khan time, so he didn't have the latest tech. So he just did it on horseback with bows. So he just killed everybody, took everything, and then sent his people in there to tax you. Kind of like government does today. It's not much difference there. So the point is I'm not sure that this is some great revelation, and he, of course, doesn't have anything. So he goes into that, spends a lot of time on that. He's written this like a novel, which personally I detest. I don't like having conversations. This guy said that. You're walking through there. I don't personally like that. Now, maybe you do. Maybe you find that more interesting. But automatically, this reads like a novel because he's written it like a novel. It reads like a comic book, basically. The information is fun. It's interesting. It tweaks your imagination. There's some interesting little drawings of this particular area. It seems like the caves around here are not anything overly special and were built back in the Middle Ages or even earlier by people in control there and maybe been hiding things and everything else. You got to remember that Romania has been under major onslaught for most of their history, particularly initially when they were invaded by Islam and the Turks, who controlled all of that, actually, and were using the population to make into murdering slaves and raping them and everything else, the homosexually raping them and everything else. So there's a whole history here of that. So I don't know if these caves are anything special. I'm going to look into it and give a general report on that. But this book goes into, as I said, we've got, your 60 way through it before you finally get to this control center and what's in there, etc. Now, one of the things that he says is that they have holographic discs that tell you the history of the planet. And he states that 90% of the history that we are been told on every single level is wrong. And that the mythology that we know about Atlantis and Mu and all these other things tends to be all correct. Well, this is, again, not a earth-shattering revelation. I mean, most people in alternative studies agree with this. Now, whether this is helpful to you to reaffirm your position or not, I don't know what that means. But there's no specifics given. Again, I can't do that because of national security. The usual cop-out. So he can't tell you that what was going on, what was not going on in history that we know that is wrong, that we consider a fact. So it's a cop-out again. I hate cop-outs. You think you could allude to things. Well, I promised the same old story. Well, I promised to pay you for this book. I'm not going to pay you for the book. I mean, that's the kind of response that should get. I mean, we can't get anything solid. The fact that the history that we know is wrong, well, a lot of people, of course, won't believe that. Other ones that understand the alternative and disinformation world, which apparently this author is part of, know that this is kind of nonsense, that the history we're taught is wrong. I've already talked about that with common things we have today, which people don't understand the hidden history, what really went on, what is going on in so many areas. So he claims all this is nonsense. The other thing he claims is the fact that talking about known things again, which is this gold-white powder that's supposed to create immortality. Now, this has been known, some sort of Egyptian formula where it's an alchemical process of converting gold into this powder. This powder then has this strong anti-aging immortality effect. It's supposed to open up also your psychic centers, consciousness, etc. So this is not, I think they call it atomic gold. They're saying that they brought gold onto this very atomic level, which your body then takes in and uses at a very high level. So he talks about this and finding that this very pure substance, this powder, on different control powder. Now, why would it be there? Why would it be draped all over there? They talk about having it protected by a whole bunch of actual shields. These are electronic shields that if you walk into, right out of science fiction, that will then turn you into dust. So, Now, why would you protect something like that? And why was there a need to protect it that way? They were able to get through it. It seems to be a little different. Now, whether you want to seal this in something so the average person can't stumble in and see it is one thing. To put up some sort of Hollywood Star Trek force shield that incinerates you if you go into it, yet they were figured out how to get through it. So it wasn't too tough, so I'm not sure what that would be. And where are they getting, how is it being powered and everything else to do that? So they get into the control panel and they claim that there's also 3 tunnels. Again, we're getting the usual stuff here. There doesn't seem to be anything new here. So this gold powder that creates immortality, yawn, that's been around for 40 years and mass known, and it's sold in many places. The other thing is the fact that we have the usual rhetoric you get. Now, he's saying that, as I said, history is not what we've been told lies. Yeah, we all know that. So, not new, not surprising, nothing else. So he talks about how it kind of works and how this machine gives you this information, this holographic, so forth. There doesn't seem to be any, we don't know who placed this here and for what reason. What this is all about, why, if you want somebody to discover something, wouldn't you be a little more open about it? What's the point of providing this? Was a base for them? Maybe the history that is shown holographically there was to train the people that came there to understand the planet they were on. I think it's naive to think that this was left for Earth beings, because why would you want to give them that? So again, it depends on your personal conclusions, and we have to be very careful here, because that's what life really comes down to. It's not the information, what's the conclusion you come to it. So, and this is where the devil is in the details all the time, is that where are you coming from? That's why I always look at people's background. Well, if you're thinking in this way, your thinking is going to take the facts and mold it into what you already believe, and you will ignore anything that you don't think is right. So, if you're a big-time born-again Christian, you're going to think that anything that doesn't say Jesus on it is evil and satanic. So you're going to warp everything in that. And if you find something positive that doesn't fit in the Jesus mold, you're going to ignore it at the very least if you don't warp it. So these are the problems we have. And of course, we have a big problem with this author. So it goes into this technology. It talks about it. As I said, this has been around for many, many years, and nothing is happening there. Now, this is not surprising, of course. You know, this is where we get back into the typical problems you run into with everything. And that is the fact that, you know, the governments grab it. They put guards there or seal it up, and you can't get in there. And you'll never know what's in there, and they're not sharing with anybody. So other than him, and this has been, I said, connected to this time travel guy who has disappeared as well. He's not talking about this or anything else, time travel guy. Time travel guy Anderson had a big site with millions of hits. Now, I don't know if he made some money that way or not. He did have links to buy Amazon books and got affiliate money from it. Whatever that may have turned into, I find that that's never very much money. But maybe with 1 million people, that turned into some money for him and could have been substantial with that kind of traffic. But he was claiming he had pictures and you could come to his labs and everything else. He told this to several different people, and of course that never materialized. Nor do we have any videos from him of his time travel technology, which he certainly wouldn't be able to patent or to get out to the public. It would be way too dangerous. Many, I think it's 10 or 20% of the patents, I'm not sure the exact figure, are denied for national security reasons. So I think a time machine would be part of that. So you can't go around and do that. I mean, he would be working for the federal government if it's valid, and he would be actually making sure that all of that stuff was taken care of. So by the government, and he would be working for them. After all, he is an ex-Air Force guy and working for all these things, or Air Force. So he was working for the government. Why is he going rogue? Why is he coming out with time travel stuff? Doesn't make sense if he worked for the airport, if he's real, etc. He apparently is hooked up with Peter Moon. And the problem with Peter Moon is that he's written a lot of novels that he calls books, Montauk and other things. It's very difficult to actually, and I believe, people have said, and I haven't really checked this out, but the inside cover of these books apparently says that they are a work of fiction. So he's not stating these are a non-fiction book. So these are the type of things that we have to, again, look at. What does that mean? So when you do something like that, so it's listed in the in the actual book listing. Let me see if I can find that in the book here. 1 minute. Now, it shows it listed under Mind, Body, Spirit, Occultism, Mind, Body, General. Also, the book is dedicated to David Anderson and the deep mystery he represents. It's almost like David Anderson was created as some sort of a character, a mystery man, since he's disappeared. So it doesn't show that this is listed under fiction at all. So that's been a misstatement on so many other books. Also, this has been written by the Rado Cinamar. Introduction, epilogue, and editing by Peter Moon. So he hasn't written any of the text, supposedly, so he says here. So he's just done as was said there. So what does that mean again? So what he has not seen anything, he has not verified anything. He gets his books in the mail that are in Romanian, translates them into English. The nightmare that is, and I'm sure it's very costly. So I don't know what he's paying to somebody to translate that book, but I'm assuming there's a big cost there. So again, we have all these very sketchy people, as is Peter Moon in himself. He's hooked up with, he's not a single person that Peter Moon is hooked up with, to my knowledge, that has any credibility whatsoever. Matter of fact, he's hooked up to some of the most strangest, bizarrest, uncredible people on the planet, like Douglas Dietrich, who claims that he's the son of Adolf Hitler, that his mother basically gave oral sex to Hitler. She spit it into a vial with ginseng in it, preserved it, and then later impregnated herself with it. What a charming mother. Does she get the Mother of the Year award? So let's get her a t-shirt. World's best Nazi mom. So all of that as we go into these details here as well. So this is talk about bizarre story, and he has all sorts of bizarre stories. And Douglas Dietrich's, and 99.9% of just about everything he says has been disproven to have anything, including his entire history. But he has a fantastic find. He's a great storyteller, and that's how people have to look at him. Let's listen to the radio, little boys and girls. Let's hear the nightly story. And again, this book is written like a novel, and I don't like it. They're not stating facts. They're not going into so many things that would make this book more credible and interesting. It's written as a conversation between this guy, I think it's Rado. I'm not sure if he's involved in it directly, but it talks about the people involved in the process, the Americans, the military there. It's apparently, another thing. Everybody's there looking at this cave and going into it and all the things with it. I don't know how that is or what that would really be. I mean, they are they are part of the EU. You would have to wonder if some sort of EU officials would go there. But of course, the EU doesn't do anything, and they're not going to spend any money on anything. That goes to the Americans, of course. They dump your pockets out, but they won't dump theirs. This is so typical. So I don't know what they're, but it's written like it's right out of a Steven Spielberg movie. Indiana Jones, the Romanian chapter. So these kind of things is how it really comes into, and the information given in here is really not. And again, they have 3 tunnels. One in the center goes to the inner Earth. And then they have another tunnel that goes to Egypt. Well, that's a hell of a tunnel from Romania to the inner Earth to Egypt. And the other tunnel, the 3rd tunnel, goes to Tibet, of course. Oh, how cliche-ish. Egypt, Tibet, and inner Earth. I mean, this is right out of a dime store novel. So these very advanced people are doing what? What have the ancient Egyptians ever done? What have the Tibetans ever done? And really, when you come down to it and you look at these ancient societies, they really haven't done much of anything. I mean, certainly Egypt built some magnificent buildings, but none of these seem to have any great value or help their society. Ultimately, they were conquered and really didn't make any, their gods, their magic didn't save them. They didn't have any technology to zap the enemy. They were all conquered and occupied for 700 years by the Greeks and the Romans. I mean, this is fact. So, I mean, certainly the Egyptians themselves also pretty much invented everything from brain surgery to beer seems to come from the the ancient Egyptians. It just goes on and on. So certainly they were a genius group of people, more than just building stuff. But ultimately, they couldn't beat the biggest thing, which is life and death. Their whole society was based on living longer in terms of immortality, and that was not achieved. While they did live fairly long, the pharaohs, into their 80s, nobody was that long-lived, nor was there ever that result happen. So they went through these complicated burial rituals so that they would survive in the afterlife, which basically was non-physical because they gave up their physical body, which then was supposed to reunite with all the other things there. So it's the usual stuff you get, but there was no physical immortality there, or even people living to be 100, 200, etc. So what do we have there? So what are the great things that this culture would want to go to Egypt for? Why would they want to go to Tibet, which even has a worse record? Particularly ancient Tibet was a very pagan country using animal sacrifices in the Bon tradition. The Buddhists took over and cleaned up their act, but what is their stuff? Now, I've recently just done a lecture, so check out, were the ancient Egyptians and Tibetans a great culture? So listen to that, and you can figure out for yourself what that's all about. So it goes into this, the details of all these types of things and how, well, they don't know how anything works, basically. They go through this information, they looked at it. And as I said, when we get up to ancient history that doesn't meet what we're told, what is basically told to us is that secret. I'm so tired of that. So tired. You can't, he agreed not to talk about this stuff and everything that goes in. Everybody's a mystery man. Anderson, the time travel guy who disappeared, everybody that Peter Moon works with lacks credibility. Douglas Dietrich, Preston Nichols, Anderson. He did all this stuff and went public for a short period of time and then disappeared. So I don't know if he made his money and then left. He wasn't selling that much. So I'm not sure what he was up to, but he was selling a little bit. And he had this huge website with a fantastic traffic there. So I don't know if he sold ads or other things. Did he make any money there? I have no idea. But certainly he has disappeared, and there's nothing that really talks about. The book is very boring at the beginning, talking about the Bilderbergers and the Masons and how they run the world. Yawn, yawn, yawn. That doesn't really what I care about. Of course, there's a lot of ifs, ands, and maybes about this technology. They really don't know anything about it. So, to bring any kind of serious information there. So the problem is that what kind of credibility you have. Here's a guy that gets books in Romanian. He translates them. He doesn't know if they're good or bad. He's just a publisher. Simple as that. He has his own publishing company. He's published all his Montauk books and apparently has made good money from that. There's talk that the Montauk books sold hundreds of thousands of copies, so he must have put a fair amount of money in his pocket. He writes books on Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. He wrote a giant book on him. He's been involved in Scientology. He's involved with a whole bunch of goofballs. There's not a single person he's hooked up with that has any credibility. And he himself talks a lot of nonsense about what he does. How can you straight face be on a show and write books with a guy who claims he's Adolf Hitler's son? Because mommy gave oral sex to Hitler, a little Asian woman, and then spit it out and brought it and then impregnated herself. What is the possibilities of that actually happening? And of course, there's all sorts of time frame problems and everything else that goes with that. But the bottom line is this is just wild allegations, and everything that comes out of this guy who he basically sees as his best friend. He wrote books with this guy and everything, have zero credibility. There's absolutely no credibility whatsoever. It's all nonsense. People have proven almost everything that's come out of his mouth to be wrong. So, this is a serious problem. So what are we supposed to do with this? So if you're going to align yourself with people that have no credibility, why should we believe any books? As I said, these are written like a novel. They read like a novel. And I'm assuming that that's what these are. There really is nothing here that we can verify. And of course, Peter Moon is saying, well, I got it from Rado. I believe him to be credible. I think he went there a couple of times. I don't think he saw anything of note. The bottom line is that there's no. Certainly, he didn't do it. This book, when he published it, he had no background on it. Supposedly, this David Lewis Anderson, Mr. Time Travel, was going through this process here, and he verified it. Well, that's convenient yet again. A guy that can't be contacted, that doesn't want to talk about anything. And of course, we have a picture of this guy who could be anybody. I mean, he could be paid as an actor for all we know. It almost looks like this whole David Anderson guy is a created fictitious character that Moon can play off of as the secret agent that can't be found but knows everything. 007. He's not just 207s, he's 607s. So the whole idea is that these are the kind of things we run into which make this kind of information completely and totally uncredible, and you're not getting any information. So if we would have said, well, this is what happened back in ancient times, not what you've been taught, we could say, that's interesting. Can we verify that somewhat? Now, he won't talk about that, and how convenient. And of course, everything is linked to some mysterious Tibetan. Like, here we go again. Why the Tibetans would be operating out of Romania. They have a big enough problem trying to survive in their own little rat hole. Rado, of course, is not his real name. We don't know who he is. He's hiding. He won't talk to anybody, even though he wants to publish all these books, and he's got a couple more in the series. And to get to a full understanding of this entire project, well, you're going to have to read all the books, which I will eventually. But it's all tied into this. It's got all the cliches in it, the Tibetans, which are connected to this. Well, why would Tibet be? And why isn't there something like this in Tibet, or something that has been talked about? So it's the same old story about really a cultural people who've nothing more than a formal churchy country ran by a bunch of churchy people. So what have they done? What is their great aspects in life? Well, you tell me. But there's absolutely no credibility to this. Tunnels that go in the earth, tunnels that go here. Has everybody explored that? How do they know? And of course, it's all top secret, and it's a very comic book reality, as is Rado. I mean, it's a lot of fiction. I mean, this would make a great Indiana Jones movie, but past that, there's just no credibility to this all. It's really sad, if you want credibility as a writer, everything he's written, from the Montauk Projects, which he's famous for, is a big, giant question. We really don't know anything about it. His source is Preston Nichols, a very odd, strange guy who seems to have some credibility. And were there projects going on there? Probably. Are the details correct? Who knows? Preston Nichols certainly was odd at the top level. He is interesting, he speaks well, but so does all good con artists. So we just don't know. What did he go to? Are the details correct? Well, I think Preston Nichols made up a lot of stuff. He filled in details. He talked about things to sound cool, like everybody does. Talking to the gray aliens, working with them, that they stunk, and he tried to wash them. So the whole idea, these are all the things that are things to give you credibility. The problem is there's absolutely nothing that Peter Moon has ever written about, it's ever involved in, that I consider credible, especially coming from a Scientology high level, which is even in this book. I mean, he squeaks Scientology into most of his writings I've read recently. There's some reference to it, as it was here. He then has another mysterious character, this David Anderson, which has now disappeared and nobody can find. Whatever his connections are or not, well, why is this? I mean, you're not going to come out with such advanced technology and be ignored. So I don't know what that's about. I don't know what the scheme was. It apparently, and it almost looks like he's an invention of, or control of, or a paid person of Peter Moon. Peter Moon is now running the Time Travel, quote, Institute, similar to what Anderson ran. But Anderson's page is still up there with lots of interesting time travel information and good time travel information in terms of giving you a bigger picture of it. But nothing of it is any kind. This is all old stuff just compiled together. This whole story here makes no sense. Of course, we don't have many pictures that I'm aware of. As I said, I thought there was some filming in these, quote, tunnels going on. that was shown. This guy, somebody did some story there, and of course it died. It's pretty old. There's not much coming from this. Did they really find this kind of technology? I heard this talk about, and I remember some film being showed, but the film that was showed was not very impressive from what I remember. I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find that, as I've mentioned. But the problem is that this is a great story. It's a great work of I don't know what, but it certainly reads like fiction, as is everything that Peter Moon puts out that seems to be reading like fiction. And he's still milking Montauk consistently with his newsletters and other things. So, it's a fascinating case. Is there any validity to it? But, I used to sell this kind of stuff years ago. I sold it as, hey, it's information. It's just out there. Whether it has any truth or not, whether it works, whether you believe it or not, well, that's up to you personally. And to a large extent, I think that's basically what Moon is trying to do here, because he kind of steps to the side. Well, this is Rado. This is David Anderson's opinion. Is it real? Is it connected? Well, in this book in particular, he dodges around all this stuff, so it isn't caught that, you are saying, well, he's not saying that. And he didn't say it in Montauk, and he didn't see anything at Montauk. He didn't see anything in Romania, even though he claims he has went there. Some recent reports about him shows him he's kind of a boob. He doesn't understand subtle energies or anything else. So I don't know. I don't know if those reports, you can't believe what other people say either. So it just is all a bunch of uncredible stuff. It's very much of a novel type writing, and there's little or no meat to it. You got to look for, is there something new? Like chemical 1497 was found, unidentified, but has this amazing... Not that you're finding atomic gold hooked up to the Egyptians. Come on, this goes back 50 years. You're going to go to centers, and what are this? You go to Tibet and, of course, Egypt. Right. Well, we all know that the greatest civilizations, which nobody wants to take credit for because of their accusation that they sacrificed tens of thousands of people, is the Mayan Aztec cultures, which were far advanced from the Egyptians. Tunnel didn't go there. And what is the tunnel to the Earth thing? Now, there's been talk about inner Earth civilizations, etc., for a long time. What was it? Was it Perry? I forget his name. But he supposedly, after his death, published a book where he flew into the top of the Earth, went into the inner worlds, and they had entire worlds there. And this was a very credible military person. What can you do with that? You can just shake your head. There's a whole reality, a whole nother world in the inner Earth. And everybody leaves them alone. Nobody talks to them. Nobody goes there and does anything. Well, life is stranger than fiction, as they say. So is there some credibility? Were stuff found in a cave? Well, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked by that. And the problem is just like everything in Egypt, and of course all the finds in Central and South America that are kept secret as well, is that you'll never really know. You can't get any proper information. Then you get somebody like this who wants to make a story of it, and they have no credibility whatsoever. How can you possibly behind anybody who seems to be, appears to me to be a radical Scientologist and a guy who follows a complete crazy guy who thinks he's Hitler's baby? So all of this is just so out there, and we're supposed to take that and put it together with a serious book. And of course, all of the things he's hooked up with are so outrageous and silly that how can we possibly? I can't think of anything looking through the books that he's put out there other than his book on L. Ron Hubbard, which I haven't read yet, that is based in anything that is reality in terms of anything that can be used even practically. It's all a bunch of nonsense. And certainly David Anderson, who he's somehow connected with, was always evasive. I remember him talking in an interview with a particular guy, I forget his name, out of New York, who said, I want to come and see you. This is what he taught. I forget his name. He's a new age kind of guy that's been out there for years. And the bottom line is that he said, I was going to take you 6-8 months because of the clearances. What do you mean clearances you have to go? I thought he was working on his own. What is that all about? So the whole idea is that nobody were gaining access to his lab to see anything he was doing. It's all nonsense. So the whole idea is that person never went to his lab, and neither did anybody else there. So this is all the problem with going after people that have absolutely no credibility. And if you're going to report wild stuff, well, you should have a little caveat to it, stating the fact that, this is wild. Well, he does do that a little bit in this book. You think he's grown up, but then he goes and publishes some ridiculous stuff as well. So the problem is that if you're going to try and get serious stuff out there when you produce crazy, wild stuff that and associate with not a single credible person, well, why should we believe anything in there? This is all hearsay. This is all novel stuff. It doesn't really say much of anything except there's this cave and these tunnels. And yeah, but there's really nothing to it. You won't report anything there. Of course, we can't figure out the technology. And any kind of information that you gain from these real history holographic images you saw, you refuse to report because this is part of the secret project. And this whole guy, Rado, is a made-up person who lives the life of some goofball spy because he doesn't want to be known giving out this information. Well, again, it's like everything else. Well, would you? Is this dangerous? Well, I guess it is, but it's hard to believe. If you think you can hide anywhere in this world, you're kidding yourself. Secondly, everybody knows who this guy is directly or indirectly. He's using the post office. He's sending packages to Peter Moon in the United States. Do you think it's that difficult to trace who this guy is and find him in Romania? Well, I think you're kidding yourself if you think that. The world's a very small place and people can be found very easily. You have to be public one way or another. So to think that he has to hide out that much or whatever is involved, and now, it's like all these people that claim that, this is secret. If you're publicly out there, you're being allowed to do it. So the whole idea is that that's the way it goes. If this was something they didn't want you to talk about, well, you would be killed or have other problems. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's how these things work. I think it's naive to think that these things wouldn't happen. I mean, this happens with so many cases of people that shoot their mouth out about everything. I mean, they're out there talking about things like reverse engineering, which Bob Lazar does, but Bob Lazar wouldn't be able to function for a second. They cloud your record, they screw with what you are in reality, just like they did with him, and he's a bad guy who got arrested for prostitution charges and all the things. So they dirty you up, and they want you to give the information out because you don't have any credibility, and that's why it's published. So if this was so terrible and secret, Peter Moon would not be able to publish it. So when you hide like this and not give out at least a taste of what is fake information, then we can't give you any credibility. Now, most people understand the fact that we're living in a contrived reality, and that includes everything we know. And the fact is that mythology is more correct than what we consider history. Well, of course, that makes sense to me. But, also mythology is very contrived. There's so many, it's almost like dream talk. So there are strange images given to you that are not real and that are made up and that were used as pulp fiction back then. But the core of them is correct? Well, probably in some instances. But mythology is all over the map as well, with really outrageous, silly tales and things that do make a little sense. And of course, you then try and tie those together as, these real mythical beings were real beings, the giants, the whatever the people are that were out there that are in Sumerian literature and so forth. So you tie these little things in with that, and then this becomes this special informational situation that goes on, which really isn't the case. It's a mishmash of information that's difficult. So here we go again. There's no allusion to or even kind of statements like things that are real that we consider mythology. So when you cop out to that extent, there's nothing in this book. It's a story. It's a story written by an uncredible editor and an uncredible author who has no background, no history, no nothing. It's a contrived person that, of course, has a fanciful background. There always are special people. And, of course, this special person, this David Anderson, who's found time travel, who's technically just a military guy, is special and he's a mystery man. Yeah, except he was all over the place trying to make money somehow, or at least whatever he was doing. Now, all of a sudden, this person has disappeared with no explanation. And there certainly should be an explanation, even though he really didn't charge any money for anything. He was selling a little fairly boring little DVD on time travel, which was popular then, and maybe he made some money there. You have to wonder why that was done, period. And he put up a website with a lot of links to Amazon to sell more products. So the whole idea is that I'm not sure what all that means, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but certainly zero credibility. Everything that Peter Moon is involved with has zero credibility. Are they interesting stories? Are there a shred of truth in it? Well, we just don't know. Was Montauk real? Was Preston Nichols real? Maybe he was the guy who fixed the electricity there. Maybe he was the plumber and cleaned the toilets out. We don't know. There's really no proof of any of that. So certainly there's a lot of gossip about Montauk, which tends to be true, but not the details. Were there secret government programs going on at Montauk? Yeah, probably so. Were they these kind of time travel experiments? We don't know. There's a lot of people who are nobodies. This is their link to fame. I was there. I wrote this book. And if you do it right, there's also money connected to it. So we run into all these things. So this is their fame. They are special. People go to talk to them about Montauk. Preston Nichols, if the sales figures are correct on these books, he made a lot of money from the Montauk story. And so did Peter Moon. And we can pretty much confirm that because he's got like 8 books that have Montauk in the title. So he can milk it in every way he can. So now we have all these other books on this situation going out there. Another incredible thing that we just don't know about. Certainly there's a huge amount of things, history, findings, archaeological, anything that's an anomaly is generally hidden or thrown in the trash. There are thousands of these things. Only regular scientific discoveries that can be backed by the classical boobs in Dumbademia ever get into the books or ever change anything. The people in those institutions follow the company line. If it's weird, if it's strange, if it doesn't make sense, it's thrown in the trash at the very least. And at the top, it's suppressed and destroyed. So this is how everything goes. But, here we go again. I wish somebody would come out that has some sort of credibility or can back these stories up. This is written like a dime novel, reads like a dime novel. And, it's fascinating. It's fun to read this stuff. What are we to make of it? And what does it do to your life personally? Let's say this all is true. Well, the big answer to that is, so what? It was like reading a comic book. It was entertaining for the time, and that's it. Because there's nothing there that has any value to it. So there's nothing you can take away from this. The technology is not something you can even think about and maybe copy or think, oh, that's an interesting. Nothing. It's all old style stuff. So you're going to make some monoatomic gold powder. That's nothing new. Holograms? Nothing new. So there's nothing there. And the point is that the whole thing kind of reeks of a bad story. Hope that's helpful. I'll have more reviews coming of the rest of the volumes of this in the future. I'm not sure when, but stay tuned. Holograms? Nothing new. So there's nothing there. And the point is that the whole thing kind of reeks of a bad story. Hope that's helpful. I'll have more reviews coming of the rest of the volumes of this in the future. I'm not sure when, but stay tuned.